Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm speaking too low. I'm at a conference, academic conference, part of my sabbatical leave. And so I came down to Miami to attend the conference, hang out, listen to some ideas. But I decided that I needed to do the first ever road X spaces. Usually all of the previous X spaces, I've done them from the safety and warmth of my study. But this is the first time that I'm doing this on the road, just because I listened to this chat between Bill Maher and Megyn Kelly. I've gotten to know Megyn Kelly well. I've been on her show several times. She's come on my show once. She's even more delightful once you get to know her. She's got it all. She's incredibly smart, tenacious, a honey badger, beautiful, elegant. She's got it all. Bill Maher, I've never had the pleasure of meeting him. A few years ago, his people had reached out to my publisher when The Parasitic Mind had come out, and I think on either one, but I think two occasions they had tried to get me on the show, which of course I was more than happy to oblige. But at the time, we had COVID travel restrictions in Canada. So even though, at one point the Bill Maher show was being done, I think remotely, but then when they opened up and returned to in-person show in Canada, yet we hadn't had the opening up, the travel opening up, because Justin Trudeau is my overlord, and so he decides whether I'm allowed to move or not, and if I can take out my dog for a walk, because COVID can really spread in the middle of winter when you're walking alone in minus 20-degree weather. That's why you have to have a curfew. But in any case, that's a topic for a different time. I'm sure many doctoral dissertations will be written about some of the stuff that took place during the COVID era. But so I never got a chance to go on a show, and of course I would love to go on his show, if only because it allows me to open up my ideas to some people who otherwise would not hear of my stuff, right? I don't need to go on many of the shows that where people are already converted, so to speak. So the Bill Maher platform is uniquely important because a lot of the progressives and liberals and so on, the Democrats tend to go there, and so they really need to hear some of the stuff I have to say. So let's hope that I will still be in play to go on a show. If not, well, there it is. The point of what I wanted to do today is actually talk specifically about his performance on Megyn Kelly's show, but more generally link it to something that I've talked about on many, many occasions, including in The Parasitic Mind, the inability of people to change their opinions, irrespective of the amount of information that you give them. Now, this is something that was particularly important in Chapter 7 of The Parasitic Mind, because for those of you who read my book, there I was talking about, what is an epistemological tool that we can use in order to arrive at some truth. And so there I talk about, the building of nomological, networks of cumulative evidence as a astoundingly powerful mechanism to prove your point, right? And so many of you have already heard me talk about this, but if I want to prove to you that, there is a sex specificity of toy preferences, boys prefer certain toys and girls prefer other toys, and those sex-specific preferences are not due to social construction, they are due to universal biological and evolutionary reasons. How would I go about doing that? Well, I could get you data from across cultures, across time periods, across species, across methodologies, across theoretical frameworks, across disciplines, across dependent measures, all of which triangulate in demonstrating that the position that I'm holding is the vertical one. But in that chapter, I also talk about the fact that, unfortunately, people have not evolved critical thinking abilities to arrive at some truth, but rather, as two French psychologists have argued in a brilliant book, The faculty of reason in order to win arguments. And therefore, the la 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 la, I don't want to hear it, and you put your fingers in your ears, is regrettably an indelible part of the architecture of the human mind. Now, that is something, by the way, that I have long studied, and in a sense, I'm giving you here sort of the theoretical and academic background, the psychological background to what I'll be talking about with Bill Maher. But this is something that I've been studying for well over 30 years. So many of you know that, my doctoral dissertation was in the area of psychology of decision making. Specifically, in my dissertation, I looked at how much information do people need to acquire when choosing between alternatives before they decide to stop and commit to a choice, right? I'm choosing between two political candidates to vote for, between two employees to hire, between two women that I might end up, marrying, between cars, between anything, right? So there's a sequential process whereby I acquire information iteratively, and at some point, as I explained in my doctoral dissertation, I hit a stopping threshold that says, okay, well, I've seen enough information to commit and choose the Mazda, to marry this girl, to vote for this candidate. And so I looked at the cognitive strategies that people use when stopping the additional acquisition of information. And so I've been steeped in the study of how the human mind processes information and arrives at a decision for much of my career. Now, I could apply it in marketing and in consumer behavior, but I don't only apply it there, right? Even though I'm housed in a business school, I could apply it for mate choice as I have and for many other decisions. Now, why am I talking about all this? Because it turns out, of course, as you might imagine, that humans are not these unbiased processors of information. So, for example, we succumb to something called the distortion bias and the confirmation bias when we make a decision. So if I make a decision and then I might experience, right, post-decisional angst, right? I experience cognitive dissonance at the fact that I chose the Mazda and, oh no, I should have probably chosen the other car. Well, then there are ways by which I will restructure the information to assuage my cognitive dissonance. So distortion bias would be, I will reevaluate the information in a way that supports the choice that I made. Or confirmation bias would be, I only look at post-decisional information that confirms the decision that I made. And there are many, many such examples in the decision-making literature. The anchoring and adjustment heuristic that Kahneman and Tversky talked about, right? Once you anchor yourself in a position, you don't adjust sufficiently away from that anchor, even if the anchor is a completely random anchor. For example, there's the primacy and recency effect in cognitive psychology. So primacy and recency refers to whether the information that you first see about someone looms larger than later information you see about them. Recency effect would be the later information looms larger. So, for example, with the primacy effect, I can show you 3 pieces of information, positive information about someone that you might date, and then 3 negative ones. Or I could show you 3 negative ones and then 3 positive ones. Or I could show you positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. Well, it turns out that the order in which this information is provided has a large bearing on the final evaluation, which, again, from a strictly objective perspective, it shouldn't, because I'm still seeing the same amount of information. I'm only seeing it in different orders. So in the primacy effect context, let's suppose I see 3 pieces of positive information about the date that I'm going out with. She's hardworking, she's beautiful, and she's kind. So now what happens, there's a positive glow. I'm anchored in her positive glow. As negative information then comes in about her, she is dogmatic, she is a progressive, and she puts gender, her pronouns in her signature. Well, then I won't adjust sufficiently when I receive that negative information because I was anchored in her positive glow. I received the positive information first. So the reason I'm talking about all this is because all of this stuff that I'm talking about has been greatly studied in academic psychology and in behavioral decision theory and so on. And it's very much within the training that I got, and certainly in my PhD, and then the work that I did post my PhD. So now, how do we link that to Bill Maher? Well, I mean, he exhibits an orgiastic, unhinged version of many of these things that we've studied for so many decades when we're studying how human minds make decisions. Before I do that, I should just mention again that I want to contextualize what I'm talking about here with something that I mentioned on a show. And actually, the gentleman on whose show I appeared found out that I had been mentioning my appearance on a show, and he was very excited that I was doing so. It's a British psychiatrist who had invited me on a show a few months ago. And at the end of the show, he asked me a question that I don't think anyone else had ever asked me on any of the shows that I've appeared on. And that is, you've been a professor now for 30 years. What is the singular most surprising finding about the human condition that you'd like to share? And so I thought for a second or two, and then I said, well, the inability of people to change their minds in light of an astounding amount of incoming information. And so you can see how that relates to today's discussion on Bill Maher's appearance on Megyn Kelly. So now let's drill into that. As I was listening to him on Megyn Kelly, let me just first begin by saying I thought that his aura, the way that he interacted with her, well, you're just silly. Well, that's just stupid. I mean, do you really believe that, right? That kind of smugness and arrogance is not, it demonstrates, certainly something dispositional about his personality, but it also demonstrates that he's probably not had a lot of instances where people have challenged him. And by the way, Megyn Kelly was very, very polite and restrained, so it's not as though she was being combative. But the second that you start saying, well, do you really frankly believe something so stupid, something so silly? Really? You really believe that? And then you could sense that he's getting unhinged simply at the fact that she is challenging him, right? She was a counselor who was cross-examining people in the courtroom, so she doesn't suffer fools gladly. And yes, of course, he's a guest on her show. She has to show decorum. She was polite and kind, but she did try to challenge him. So I thought already that kind of smugness and arrogance, how could anyone not see what I'm saying here? I'm Bill Maher and I'm funny and so on. I thought that was very off-putting. But now let's drill down on some of the positions that he took, which really, it's as though he exists in a parallel universe that is completely detached from anything that I experience, right? So either I'm the biggest moron who simply doesn't see things the way that he does, or maybe he needs to revise some of his positions. So first, he said that the reason why he detests Donald Trump so much, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have these exact quotes, is that Donald Trump would never relinquish power if he were president. As a matter of fact, he hasn't relinquished power. So you're wrong to think that right now there has been a peaceful transfer of power, because he kept saying, there's nothing more important in our democracy than the peaceful transfer of power. Now, of course, Donald Trump is not sitting in the White House. Joe Biden, yes, technically he's been president now for almost 4 years, although it's unclear whether he knows whether he's a phone, an avocado, or the president of the United States. But in any case, so how can he then reconcile the fact that Donald Trump did relinquish power, right? He says, but he has never uttered the words, I concede the election, right? So he said that, no, it was stolen from me. And at least the Democrats don't do that. So then Megyn Kelly said, but what do you mean? Hillary Clinton spent 4 years saying that he's not the real president. She delegitimized him. She said he's not. It's fake. It's Russian gate. She gave 600 different reasons why he's not really the president. He said, no. She never said that. She goes, well, of course, Bill. What words did he use? So then she plays the tape. He goes, oh, yeah, okay. Well, but then, sure, she may have said those words, but she right away conceded. So look how you have to alter the shifting goalposts. So in her case, she spent 4 or 5 years in an astoundingly unhinged way saying he literally is not the president of the United States. He's a Russian, agent, right? He is illegitimate. It was completely stolen. It was Moldovan, whatever. She came up with a million different reasons, right? But that's not a threat to democracy because she used the words, okay, I concede defeat. Donald Trump did not say, I concede defeat. Therefore, he remains in power. Then he said, well, okay, fine. I mean, yes, technically it's true that he conceded and that he is no longer president. But if you give him a chance to be president again now, if he wins in 2024, do you really think that in 2028 he's just going to walk away? Do you really believe that he's going? So imagine that this guy who's, I don't know, maybe 70 years old. So he first says Donald Trump does not believe in democracy. He would never give up the presidency. But then the evidence is that he did give up the presidency. There's been another president. There's been a peaceful transfer of power. But that doesn't prove that Donald Trump would not give up power because he hasn't used the word concede. Now, when Megyn Kelly tries to give a few examples of how much more astoundingly dangerous Joe Biden is to reality, to science, to individual freedom, all he turns back to Bill Maher by saying is, yeah, but none of that is as important as the peaceful transfer of power. So imagine how detached, how parasitized you must be. There's been another president in power, but Bill Maher codes that as proof that Donald Trump has never relinquished power. That's what a parasitized mind does, right? Don't believe your lying eyes. Language creates reality. That's called deconstructionism, Jacques Derrida. And therefore, yes, sure, it may appear as though Donald Trump did not become a dictator. Donald Trump did not institute martial law. Donald Trump did not forcefully hang on to power. But he didn't use the word I concede, and therefore he is a dictator. And if you give him another chance, this time he truly won't leave office. So notice how there is no amount of evidence that was able to shift him away from just him being an utter, unhinged lunatic. Right? Now, why am I doing this? I'm supposed to be right now, well, I am at an academic conference. But if anything, as I discussed at the start of this X Spaces, boy, is this a beautiful case study of many of the things that we study in consumer psychology and in psychology of decision making, because it demonstrates how someone with such a huge platform could then completely be misguided to millions of people. And frankly, I mean, it's really baffling. So let me go on. So Donald Trump will never relinquish power. Trump has never conceded the 2020 election. Nothing is more important than the peaceful transfer of power. Then he said, well, Donald Trump he led a military coup. It was an insurrection, right? I mean, you have these people who are, the average age was, 68, who are coming in with selfies. We came very close to losing our democracy. Okay, those were insurrectionists. Now, when Megyn Kelly tried to gently say, well, those were not insurrectionists. That's not what insurrection means according to the letter of the law. These were just people who, trespassed in some sense, and that, they weren't supposed to be in certain places, even though they were invited in, even though there was a polite exchange with the Capitol Police and so on. No, it really was an insurrection. We came within millimeters of losing our democracy. And how did we do that? It's because the dictator, Donald Trump, was egging them on to do that, even though he repeatedly said in his speech, go down and peacefully protest, right? But that was viewed by Bill Maher as an example indistinguishable from the most brutal military coups that have littered history. He's never relinquished power. He tried to actually institute a military dictatorship with the tofu Viking. You know, the guy who walks around with the Viking stuff. I guess he's a vegan or something. So I call him the tofu Viking. That was the leader of the military coup. He said there were police officers who were killed during the January 6th insurrection. Megyn Kelly very gently corrected him and said, there's not a single police officer. No, they were. No, there wasn't a single one. The one that you're thinking about is someone who later had a stroke after the January 6th incident. As a matter of fact, the only person who died on January 6th is a woman who was shot by Capitol Police. Yeah, okay, well, whatever. Well, what do you mean, whatever? You just said an unbelievable lie. Now, here's the point. Either you are so detached from reality, you're so misinformed that you're promulgating the narrative that police officers died during the insurrection, which is complete falsehood, or you know it's a falsehood, but you're used to, speaking to, your audience who's completely enamored and captive to you, so that you could say anything. Up is down, down is, freedom is slavery. I mean, slavery is freedom. Men are women, and people will just, like good little seals, laugh and clap. So either you're bafflingly uninformed and ignorant, or you're willfully spreading lies. So when it comes out that it is incontrovertible, that it is not true what he said, that police died, police in plural died during the violent insurrection, he just goes, yeah, okay, whatever. That's the way you choose to see it. No. That's not the way I choose to see it. It's called reality. So someone who doesn't have intellectual hubris, someone who is epistemically humble says, wow, okay, I guess I was misinformed. I was wrong. My apologies. Thank you for correcting me, Megyn. He didn't do that. Then she told him, she started saying, well, how could you, if you seem to be so into these principles, she didn't use the term deontological principles. This is something that I use, right, when I talk about deontological versus consequentialist ethics. She goes, well, what do you think about when Hunter Biden's laptop was suppressed, that story was suppressed, so that, Joe Biden won precisely because there was a complete collusion to suppress that story. His answer was, come on, who cares about that? Nobody gives a shit about the Hunter Biden story and where his penis has been and what kind of drugs he's on. And then she corrected him and said, well, but I'm not talking about his personal conduct. I'm talking about that there was a huge amount of incontrovertible evidence of the astounding criminal corruption of his father, who was running for president of the United States. Oh, come on, there's no such thing. What are you talking about? This is nonsense. Right? And of course, then she quoted studies, estimates that show that had people known about, the Hunter Biden story, had it not been suppressed in cahoots between all the journalists and the social media platforms, then there could have been a swing in the other direction of 10 to 12%. I think those were the numbers. Come on, right? So despite the fact that he's receiving this evidence, that deontological violation he didn't care about. Incidentally, Joe Biden is astoundingly more dangerous to the United States than Donald Trump could ever be. Again, this doesn't mean that I love Donald Trump. I'm Canadian. I don't have posters of him in my bedroom, which my wife and I use as marital aid for our, instead of playing Barry White music, we just look at a Donald Trump poster. But it's because I actually care about reality. I care about truth. Joe Biden has been a orgiastic racist for 50 plus years. There's a million examples of that. So if you're a, quote, liberal who cares about fighting racism, then you certainly would be anti-Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been astoundingly corrupt. We also have stories about him having been rather unsavory towards women. We have that information. Joe Biden has been a plagiarist. He's lied. He's engaged in political corruption, pay to play, that should have sent him to probably prison for the rest of his life. He supports the transgender stuff. When Megyn Kelly said, well, I care about my daughter not being in a dressing room with a guy with his penis, he said, come on, but that's not important as democracy, right? So Bill Maher doesn't have any children. So Bill Maher doesn't have the theory of mind that says, you know what? Most people actually care that their women and their young girls and daughters don't share a track and field meet or a swimming pool or showers with a 6'2" guy with a 9-inch penis who tomorrow morning calls himself Linda. Bill Maher suddenly loses his classical liberal credentials when it comes to that. Oh, come on, nobody takes that stuff seriously. Okay? Open borders. You want to talk about an existential threat to the United States? What could be a greater threat than the fact that Joe Biden has done everything in his power to leave the borders completely porous, allowing millions of people to come in and alter the fabric of the United States, arguably forevermore. Donald Trump doesn't believe in that. I could go on with another 74,000 examples of how Joe Biden is astoundingly more dangerous to the ethos of the United States. But no, Bill Maher has said all that is erased because, according to him, the ultimate measure of how much Donald Trump is an existential threat is that he has not used the words, I concede that I lost fairly and squarely. Okay? So there can't be a better case study of what happens to a mind once it never wants to alter an anchored position. So what happened with Bill Maher on Megyn Kelly is twofold. Number one, how apparently he was, bafflingly misinformed, if I'm being charitable. If it wasn't that he was misinformed about all this, then my God, was he willfully duplicitous and deceptive because he's promulgating known lies. Many cops were killed on January 6th. No, there weren't any, not a single one, not one, right? And then perhaps this is more of a style issue, but it's still important. His smugness, his arrogance, you could sense that it didn't take much for her to rile him up. He became defensive. And yet the book is about, hey, we need to have conversations with each other. Oh, but by the way, asterisk, if you challenge me too much about my bullshit, then I'm going to get smug and arrogant and belittle you and call you silly and stupid. So there goes my chance of ever being invited on the Bill Maher show. I hope I'll learn to love again. What would I do if I don't have Bill Maher's platform? If Bill Maher were the guy that he thinks he is, I would be receiving an email in the next few minutes saying, Dear Dr. Saad, Bill Maher would love to have you on his show. And then you would see what happens when I pull a reason she had on his ass, and to use his term, when I tear him a new asshole. I can't stand that kind of obnoxiousness. I despise that kind of haughtiness. All right, guys, it was about 30 minutes, this thing, impromptu. I'm about to return to the conference. Later today, I am meeting, oh God, I love this guy, Jorge Mas, who is the majority owner of Inter Miami. I'm saying this not to name drop, just because one of the things that I'm so thankful for in all of my public engagement is that I've gotten to meet some absolutely remarkable people who are such gems. I'm hoping to maybe eventually invite Jorge on a chat on my show, because he is the epitome of the classic American dream. His family comes with not much. They create an incredible reality for themselves. They become hugely successful. They do big things. He's the majority owner of Inter Miami. I mean, who would have thought that this immigrant family would one day be hanging out with Lionel Messi? I've gotten to know him. We've become friends. It's an honor and privilege for me to call him a friend. I'll be heading down to the Inter Miami offices later. Not sure if I'll have a chance on this trip to meet La Pulga. I think that's how you say it in Spanish, the flea. If I'll be meeting Lionel Messi. But anyways, it's unbelievable when you put yourself out there. Yes, you take a lot of flack, but you also meet some people that otherwise the cosmos would have never allowed you to interact with each other. So I wish you all a great day. Do good, play, have fun, love. Don't wallow all day in nastiness. Always be honest when you are wrong. Admit that you're wrong. One of the reasons why I have a wonderful marriage for 25 years now with my wife is that we don't have the hubris to not admit when we're wrong. If I'm short to her, I won't say I'm not going to apologize. I go and I say, hey, sweetie, sorry, I answered you in a really obnoxious manner. Please forgive me. And then it's over, right? You don't go to bed. You don't go to bed angry. So, we all make mistakes. We all take positions sometimes that we need to revise in light of incoming information. Boy, I wish Bill Maher would heed that lesson. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for coming. I hope that you enjoyed this impromptu thing. I'm off back to the academic conference. I got to tell you one last thing before I go. I just remembered. It's been a few years that I've attended an academic conference because, of course, there was COVID and so on. I have to tell you, while I am through and through an academic, being a professor is in my DNA. I've always wanted to be an academic. I have to tell you that some of the academics, the research that they do is so small-minded, so myopic, so stay in your lane, that as I was sitting at some of these sessions, I was thinking whether it would be more fun to be injecting directly into my eyeballs Ebola. There you go, guys. Love you all. Thank you for your support. Talk to you soon. And if you wish to ask me any questions, please subscribe to my exclusive content where I will be fielding any and all of your questions. Take care, everybody. Cheers.